The alien queen's daughters disappeared. Then they were found sleeping curled up in the human's room. Its towers rose high above the shimmering landscape, and every surface sparkled with alien technology. Within its walls, the queen ruled with a mix of strictness and wisdom. She was known across galaxies for her intelligence and authority, and her daughters were her pride. Each of them possessed unique abilities. One could manipulate light, another could sense emotions, and the third had unmatched agility. Together, they seemed invincible, the shining heirs of a mighty dynasty. One morning, the palace was alive with its usual bustle. Courtiers moved gracefully along polished corridors, attendants carried trays of glowing fruits, and guards patrolled the towers with steady precision. Yet amid this normalcy, something unusual was stirring. The queen's daughters, Lyra, Nissa, and Kira, were nowhere to be found. The queen herself had been in the central chamber, reviewing the day's diplomatic reports, when she noticed their absence. At first, she assumed they were playing in the royal gardens or exploring the palace halls. But as hours passed, the absence became worrying. She called for her chief attendants and guards. "Have you seen my daughters?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the high ceilings. "They were in the East Wing this morning, Your Majesty," one attendant replied, bowing low, "but they have not been seen since." The queen's sharp eyes narrowed. Disappearance was not something that happened easily in her palace. Security systems monitored every corridor, every room. The daughters' unique energy signatures could be traced by the palace sensors. And yet, nothing. A wave of concern swept through the palace. The queen's advisors whispered nervously among themselves. "Could it be an attack?" one suggested, fear in his voice. The queen shook her head. "No, nothing has breached the palace. There is no sign of forced entry." "This is something else." Despite her calm tone, her mind raced. The daughters were more than children. They were powerful, clever, and resourceful. Yet even the cleverest could be taken by unexpected circumstances. She ordered an immediate search, sending the palace guards in teams to scan every corner. Security drones hovered silently, scanning with precise beams of light. Meanwhile, in a quiet wing of the palace, a human ambassador named Ethan lived in a modest room. Ethan was part of a diplomatic mission, sent from Earth to understand alien civilizations and represent humanity. His room was small compared to the grandeur surrounding it, with simple furnishings and a window that overlooked the floating gardens outside. Unlike the aliens, Ethan had no special powers, but he possessed something rare on Lithera: human intuition and calmness under pressure. Ethan had noticed subtle anomalies over the last few hours. Soft sounds echoing through empty corridors, faint flickers of movement on sensor screens, and an unusual stillness among the palace staff. He did not panic. Instead, he studied the patterns quietly, trying to understand what might be happening. Back in the main hall, the search intensified. Guards checked every room, every balcony, every garden path. Drones scanned for heat signatures, energy traces, or even the faintest sound of laughter or footsteps. But there was nothing. The daughters were gone. The queen walked through the palace herself, her regal figure moving with authority. Every corridor she entered was filled with tension. Courtiers stepped aside, whispering worriedly. Even the normally confident guards seemed uneasy. The queen could feel the energy of her daughters was not far, yet she could not pinpoint their location. Hours passed. The sun of Lithera dipped low, casting violet and pink streaks across the crystalline towers. The palace grew quiet, but the sense of worry remained. For the first time in her long reign, the queen felt uncertain. Ethan, observing quietly from his room, noticed something unusual on the sensor logs. The daughters' energy signatures seemed to vanish and reappear in irregular patterns, almost like they were following invisible paths. He frowned. "That's strange," he muttered to himself. "The palace systems can't detect them, but there's movement, just not where anyone expects." Curious, Ethan began examining the data in detail. He noticed that the areas of reappearing energy corresponded with certain quiet corners of the palace, places the daughters might visit if they were hiding or seeking comfort. He made a small note. These paths suggest they are not afraid. They are seeking something. Meanwhile, the queen called an emergency council. Advisors and elders gathered in the central chamber, their faces lined with concern. "We have scanned the entire palace," a chief advisor reported. "No signs of forced entry or alien intrusion. Their energy traces are gone from all monitored areas." The queen's gaze was sharp. Then they are hiding, or they have gone somewhere by choice. A murmur of disbelief spread through the council. The daughters were clever, yes, but to vanish completely from a palace with the most advanced monitoring systems in the galaxy? Impossible, or almost impossible. Back in his room, Ethan felt a strange pull in his mind. He did not understand exactly what it was, but it was almost like the daughters were close, sensing something in him. He shook his head, trying to focus. No, he told himself, I can't guess their thoughts, but I can prepare. He moved quietly through his small room, arranging blankets and pillows in a corner. Food was scarce in his room, but he set out a small tray of edible items, thinking that if anyone appeared, they might need sustenance. His human instincts told him that comfort and safety were as important as anything else in a crisis. The palace night deepened. Outside, the floating crystals reflected the soft glow of Lithera's moons. The palace guards continued their search, their voices low, but inside, Ethan felt a strange calm. He had a feeling, though he could not explain it, that the daughters might find their way to him. Hours later, in another part of the palace, the daughters moved cautiously. Lyra led the way, her light-manipulating ability allowing her to blend into shadows. Nissa followed, sensing danger and guiding the group carefully. Kiera, agile and alert, watched every corner. They were not running from danger, but seeking a safe place, a space where they could rest and feel secure. The corridors seemed endless, but instinct guided them. Somewhere deep in the palace, they felt a gentle presence. Not alien, not imposing, something calm, reassuring, and strong in an unusual way. It was human. The daughters paused. Lyra whispered, "Do you feel that? Something different, not a guard, not a watcher, something else." Nissa nodded. "Yes, it's warmth, safety." "I haven't felt this since we were very small." Kiera's sharp eyes scanned the surroundings. "I don't know who it is, but I think we can trust them, at least for now." And so they moved quietly through the halls, avoiding patrols and drones, guided by the invisible thread of trust. Meanwhile, the queen remained in her chamber, unable to sleep. She walked along the balcony, gazing at the violet skies. The palace, usually so orderly, now felt strange, hollow in some way. She knew her daughters were nearby, she could feel their energy somewhere. But where? How could they vanish so completely? Ethan, unaware of the queen's thoughts, sat on the edge of his bed, reviewing the sensor data once more. His heart beat steadily. He could not explain why, but he felt a strange connection to those he had never met. Three beings, intelligent and vulnerable, seeking safety in the vastness of a foreign palace. The night passed slowly, with tension thick in the palace halls. The search teams returned to their posts, weary but determined. The queen ordered no one to sleep until the daughters were found. But as dawn approached, a quiet thought crossed her mind. Perhaps the answer was not in technology or force, but in something she had never considered. Ethan, still alert, prepared for the unexpected. Blankets were arranged, pillows set, a small tray of food placed carefully. He did not know if anyone would come, but he trusted his instincts. Humans had a way of understanding things beyond logic, beyond sensors and beams of light. As the first rays of Lithera's sun kissed the crystal towers, a small movement occurred in the shadows near Ethan's room. Tiny footsteps, careful and cautious, approached. The daughters had finally found the presence they sought, and the story of trust, safety, and the unexpected bond between human and alien was about to begin. The queen did not yet know that her daughters were choosing a human over all the palace's grandeur. She did not know that the wisdom of Earth had found its way into her halls. But soon, everything would change. The palace of Lithera was still awake long after the violet skies had darkened into deep indigo. The disappearance of the alien queen's daughters had thrown the entire household into chaos. Guards patrolled tirelessly, attendants whispered in corners, and the drones hovered above corridors, scanning every inch of the glittering palace. Yet despite all efforts, the daughters remained missing. The queen paced in the central chamber, her sharp eyes moving from one advisor to another. "We have searched every hall, every garden, every tower," she said firmly. "Tell me again, have we checked every hidden chamber?" An elder advisor bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty, all secret chambers, including the archives and observation decks, have been thoroughly inspected. No trace of the princesses has been found." The queen's gaze sharpened. "Then this is no ordinary disappearance. There is something more at work here, something unusual." The courtiers shifted uneasily. No one dared speak aloud the thought that had begun to form in their minds. Could it be that the daughters had left the palace by choice? Meanwhile, in a quiet wing far from the chaos, Ethan, the human ambassador, was awake, observing the palace from his small room. He had noticed irregularities in the sensor data, energy signatures that disappeared in one place only to appear in another. It was as if the daughters moved along invisible paths, unseen by the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Ethan rubbed his chin, thinking, "They're not lost. They're following a pattern, a path they expect me to understand, maybe." He did not fully understand why he had this feeling, but it was strong, a strange human intuition guiding him. While the palace continued its frantic search, the daughters moved cautiously, using the shadows and corridors to avoid patrols. Lyra led the way, her control over light allowing her to bend shadows and become nearly invisible. Nissa's emotional sensing kept the group aware of nearby danger, while Kira's agility ensured that no obstacle could stop them. "This way," Lyra whispered, pausing to peer down a hallway. "I feel it, a calm presence, not like the palace, not like anyone else." "Something different," Nissa nodded. "It feels safe, I can't explain it, but it's like home." Kira tilted her head, listening. "Could it really be safe? Everything here is foreign." "It is human," Lyra answered quietly. "I don't know how I know, but it feels right." As the daughters navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the palace search teams became increasingly desperate. They had deployed every available drone, every guard, every monitoring device, yet the traces of the princesses seemed to vanish into thin air. Some advisors began to whisper about human involvement, though none dared suggest it aloud. Ethan, meanwhile, began preparing his room. He moved pillows and blankets into a small corner, arranging them to create a comfortable, hidden space. He set out a small tray of fruits and water, simple nourishment, but enough to sustain anyone who might arrive unexpectedly. His human instincts told him that comfort and safety were the keys to easing fear. As the daughters approached the wing where Ethan's room was located, their cautious footsteps echoed faintly. Lyra extended her hand and whispered, "Stay calm. If this is truly safe, we must trust it." The palace night grew quieter, almost unnaturally so. Guards reported nothing unusual, unaware that the daughters were moving just beyond their sight. The drones, designed to detect energy fluctuations, found no abnormal readings. The human mind, with its unpredictable thought patterns, had become the only unseen factor in the palace, a factor no alien technology could anticipate. Ethan sat on his bed, reviewing the sensor data again. He could see the faint blips, the anomalies that indicated the daughter's presence. "They're clever," he murmured, "more clever than anyone expects, but they're tired and they need rest." Hours passed. The palace remained tense. Courtiers speculated, guards grew weary, and drones hovered tirelessly, scanning corridors and gardens. The queen had returned to her chamber, her mind racing with possibilities. She began to consider something she had never thought of before. The daughters might not be hiding from danger at all. Perhaps they were hiding for comfort, seeking something they trusted. In the shadows, the daughters paused near Ethan's room. Lyra crouched low, examining the doorway. "It's just beyond this door," she whispered. "I feel it, safety." Nissa nodded, feeling the sense of calm and warmth. "It's different from anything in the palace, not authority, not command, but understanding." Kira hesitated. "Are we really going to trust someone we don't even know?" "We have to," Lyra said firmly. "We have no other choice right now. The palace cannot protect us as we are. Only here, only with this presence, do I feel safe." Quietly, the daughters entered Ethan's room. They were cautious, moving as silently as possible, but the small human had already noticed their presence. He looked up from the sensor screen just as Lyra stepped inside, blending the shadows with her light manipulation. Ethan's eyes widened slightly, but he did not panic. Instead, he smiled softly, understanding instinctively that these beings needed trust, not force. He gestured toward the corner he had prepared. "You can rest here," he said gently. "It's safe." The daughters exchanged glances, unsure at first. Then slowly they settled into the corner, curling up together on the blankets and pillows. Lyra's light dimmed to blend with the shadows. Nissa relaxed, sensing the calm in Ethan, and Kira let out a small sigh, relieved. Outside, the palace continued its search, unaware that the daughters were merely rooms away. Drones scanned corridors and guards called out names, but no trace of the princesses was detected. It was as if they had vanished entirely. The queen received reports that night. All searches return nothing, her chief advisor said grimly. They are not in the palace. The queen's eyes narrowed. Not in the palace, then where could they be? None of her advisors dared suggest the human. To consider that a species she considered primitive might provide shelter for her daughters was unimaginable. Yet deep inside, she felt unease. Something beyond her understanding was at play. Meanwhile, Ethan sat quietly in his room, observing the sleeping daughters. They were exhausted, their small bodies curled together for warmth and comfort. Despite their powers and intelligence, they were still young and vulnerable. He whispered softly, "You're safe here. No one will hurt you." For the first time since their disappearance, the daughters allowed themselves to rest fully. The palace, with all its grandeur and authority, could not provide the emotional safety they needed. But here, with this human, they felt a calm they had never experienced. Night turned slowly toward morning. The first rays of Lithera's sun glimmered through the window, casting soft violet light on the sleeping group. Ethan remained vigilant, watching over them without disturbing their rest. He understood, in a way the aliens might never fully understand, that trust and care could be more powerful than any technology or force. Far above, in the queen's chambers, she gazed out across the palace gardens. Something had changed, though she did not yet know what. There was an invisible force at work, subtle and quiet, yet impossible to ignore. Her daughters were missing, but perhaps not because of danger, perhaps because of something far stranger. The palace was still, but a new pattern was forming, one that would change the relationship between human and alien forever. Ethan had become more than an observer. He was a protector, a guide, and perhaps in ways yet unseen, the key to understanding what the daughters truly needed. The search teams would continue their efforts, but the daughters would remain hidden, not by trickery but by choice. They had found a presence in the palace that offered something no drone, no guard, no sensor could replicate: trust, comfort, and understanding. As the morning light bathed the palace in soft glow, the daughters slept, wrapped in blankets and safety, unaware that they had already begun a bond that would forever change the queen's perception of humans. And in that quiet room, with the gentle presence of a human who truly understood, the first steps toward something extraordinary were quietly unfolding. The sun of Lithera shone brightly over the palace, casting long violet and pink streaks across the crystalline towers. The palace, still humming with the usual bustle of attendants and guards, was unaware that the alien queen's daughters were merely rooms away from those searching for them. Ethan, the human ambassador, sat quietly in his modest room, keeping watch over the sleeping girls. He observed them carefully. Lyra, with her delicate features and soft glow from her light abilities, had her eyes closed, breathing slowly. Nissa's slender form was curled tightly against her sister's, her hands resting gently on Lyra's shoulder. Kira, the smallest but sharpest, seemed restless, shifting slightly as if ready to spring into action if needed. Despite their powers and intelligence, they were still young and vulnerable, needing warmth, comfort, and safety. Ethan whispered softly, not wanting to wake them, "You're safe here. No one will hurt you." Hours passed in quiet observation. Finally, a small stir moved Lyra. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the soft light of the room. She looked around cautiously, trying to gauge where she was. "Where are we?" she whispered, her voice small but melodic. "You're safe," Ethan replied calmly. "I am Ethan. You can rest here as long as you need." Nissa and Kira began to stir as well, their eyes adjusting to the room. The girls looked around curiously, but did not move from the pile of blankets Ethan had prepared. They had felt fear earlier in the palace, yet now they sensed something different, something they could not explain. Lyra, always the boldest, spoke first. "We felt danger, but here I don't feel it. Why do you protect us?" Ethan smiled gently. "Humans care about others. We can't always stop danger, but we try to help when we can. I believe in keeping you safe because it's the right thing to do." The girls exchanged quiet glances. Trust was a foreign concept in the palace for beings who were used to authority, power, and duty. Here, in this simple room with a human, trust seemed possible. Nissa finally spoke, her voice soft and thoughtful. You are not like the others. You don't command, you don't order, you just care." "Why?" Ethan considered the question. "Because caring matters. Strength is not just power or skill. Sometimes the strongest thing is to be gentle, to protect, to understand." Kira's eyes widened slightly. "We've never felt that, not even with the Queen. She loves us, but she is distant. You feel different." Ethan nodded. "Yes." That's what makes me different. You are free to rest here. No one will make you leave until you are ready." For the first time since their disappearance, the daughters relaxed completely. Lyra allowed her light to fade to a gentle glow, Nissa let go of tension she had carried for hours, and Kira curled into a comfortable position, finally feeling secure. Hours passed, and conversation slowly grew. Ethan asked gentle questions, learning about their experiences in the palace and their abilities. Lyra spoke of manipulating light, creating illusions and brightness. Nissa described sensing emotions, understanding the feelings of those around her. Kira, always observant, described her agility and quick reflexes. Ethan listened intently, fascinated by their abilities but more impressed by their intelligence, curiosity, and personalities. "I've never met anyone like you," Ethan said finally. "Your abilities are amazing, but what matters most is who you are." The daughters looked at him curiously. You care about us for who we are?" Lyra asked, her voice a mixture of disbelief and hope. "Yes," Ethan said gently. "Not for your powers, not for your title, not for what others expect of you, just for you." A silence fell in the room, heavy with emotion and understanding. The girls were not used to being seen this way. They had been admired, studied, and trained, but never truly understood or accepted for who they were. Here, in this small room with a human, they finally felt that acceptance. Lyra finally smiled faintly, a small light flickering in her eyes. "Then, we trust you." Nissa and Kira nodded quietly. The bond had begun. Ethan felt a surge of relief and quiet happiness. He had not expected such a deep connection, but humans often formed bonds in ways that were subtle yet strong. Trust and empathy, understanding and care. These were human strengths, often overlooked by those who valued only power or knowledge. Outside the room, the palace continued its frantic search. Guards questioned courtiers, drones hovered along corridors, and alarms occasionally beeped with false readings. The queen herself had begun to grow impatient. The idea that her daughters could hide from an entire palace was almost impossible. Yet something in her mind whispered that this disappearance was not ordinary. Ethan noticed faint energy readings on his monitoring device. They were irregular, weak, and subtle, almost like whispers. He frowned. "They're nearby, but not moving like usual. They are calm." He turned to the girls. "You don't need to hide anymore," he said. "No one will find you here unless you choose to go with them." Lyra blinked at him, still cautious. "And if the queen comes, will she punish you?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't think she will punish me. I'm only keeping you safe. If she understands, she will see that this is for your protection." Kira's brow furrowed. "You protect us even if it means the queen might be angry." "Yes," Ethan said firmly. "I protect those who cannot protect themselves." The daughters were silent, absorbing his words. It was unlike anything they had experienced before. They had grown up in a palace filled with grandeur, authority, and high expectations. Yet none of that had prepared them for this small human who offered safety, understanding, and trust without judgment or authority. As the day progressed, Ethan and the daughters shared quiet moments. They played small games to pass the time, teaching him about their world while he shared stories of Earth. He described forests, rivers, mountains, and oceans in simple words, painting pictures with language and imagination. The daughters listened with fascination, their young minds absorbing new concepts, marveling at a world beyond the palace walls. Lyra leaned forward, her eyes wide. "You mean there are oceans that go on forever, and forests filled with so many creatures?" "Yes," Ethan said. "It's a different world, but humans care for it just as I care for you." Nissa smiled faintly. "You care for something so far away, and for us, that is surprising." Kira tilted her head. "I think humans are stronger than I imagined, not just with skill, but with heart." Ethan felt warmth at her words. Humans often underestimated themselves, but moments like these reminded him why they were capable of extraordinary things. Compassion, trust, and understanding could bridge gaps no technology or power ever could. The afternoon sun shifted, casting golden-violet light into the room. The daughters began to relax further, exploring their new environment. They examined the blankets, the simple furniture, and the small tray of food Ethan had provided. Each small detail fascinated them, not because of its luxury, but because of the thought and care behind it. Lyra finally spoke again, her voice soft. We have never felt so safe, not even in the palace." Nissa nodded. "It is strange that a being so small in the palace could offer something the palace cannot." Kira's eyes shone with realization. It is not size, power, or title that matters. It is understanding, trust, care. Ethan smiled, silently agreeing. These girls, born into power and privilege, were beginning to see the truth of humanity's strength. It was not in weapons or technology, but in heart and mind. As evening approached, the daughters curled together once more, exhausted but content. Ethan kept watch, ensuring that their safety remained undisturbed. For the first time since their disappearance, they were not afraid, not tense, not worried. They were free to rest, to feel, to simply be themselves. Far above in the Queen's chambers, she sensed a shift. Something had changed in the energy of her daughters. It was subtle but unmistakable. Their presence was near, yet different from before. She did not yet understand what had happened, but a feeling deep inside told her that the answer might not lie in searching, punishing, or commanding, but in something she had not considered: trust, understanding, and care. The palace continued its search, but the daughters remained hidden, not by cunning or trickery, but by choice. They had found a presence that offered what no palace authority ever could: safety, empathy, and acceptance. As night fell once more, Ethan prepared for the Queen's possible arrival. He did not fear confrontation. Humans had long learned to face challenges calmly and strategically. Whatever came, he knew that the daughter's safety was the priority, and that the bond formed in this quiet room was already stronger than anything outside could disrupt. In this small corner of a massive palace, the stage was set for understanding, friendship, and a new perspective on strength. The daughters had discovered something they had never known, and the human had shown them the power of care, empathy, and trust. The journey was far from over, but for the first time all of them could rest, knowing that a new chapter had begun. The next morning, the palace of Lithra was bathed in violet light that shimmered off the crystal towers. The corridors were filled with attendants, guards, and drones, all searching relentlessly for the alien queen's daughters. Yet in a quiet corner of the palace, Ethan, the human ambassador, sat calmly in his modest room, observing the three young aliens who had chosen to stay under his care. Lyra, Nissa, and Kira were awake now, stretching and adjusting to the small but comforting room. They were no longer frightened. Their eyes reflected curiosity, trust, and a hint of wonder. For the first time since leaving their chambers, they felt a sense of safety beyond the power of the palace or their own abilities. Ethan watched them carefully, smiling softly. "Good morning," he said gently. "Did you sleep well?" Lyra stretched her arms and yawned. "Yes, better than I ever have," she admitted. "It is strange. We are safe, and yet we are not in the palace. How is this possible?" Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Because safety isn't about walls, towers, or guards. It's about trust. You trust me and I trust you. That's why you feel safe here." Nissa tilted her head thoughtfully. "Trust, it is not a word we use often in the palace. There everyone obeys, follows rules, or fears punishment. Here it feels different." Kira nodded. "It feels like being free but not alone. It is strange." Ethan smiled. "That is exactly what it is, freedom with care. You are free to rest, learn, and explore without fear. That is what humans believe is important, helping others while respecting who they are." The girls looked at him, absorbing the words. Their young minds were beginning to understand a concept that had been foreign to them: human compassion. Though their powers were extraordinary, and the palace had trained them in authority, strategy, and control, no one had ever explained the importance of empathy and trust. As the day progressed, Ethan decided to help the daughters understand their feelings and themselves better. He suggested small activities, games that encouraged observation, interaction, and trust. "Let's start with something simple," he said, holding a small crystal from his desk. "I want each of you to tell me what you see, not what it is, but what it makes you feel." Lyra held the crystal in her hand, watching how the light shimmered and danced. "It feels calm," she said slowly, "soft like the sky before sunrise." Nissa took the crystal next. "It feels warm, comforting like being wrapped in a blanket." Kira, observing closely, tilted the crystal and watched the reflections. "It feels alive, like it knows something I don't yet understand." Ethan nodded. "Very good. You are observing carefully and feeling deeply. That is the key, understanding what you see and connecting with it. Humans do this naturally, and now you are learning it too." The daughters exchanged glances, realizing that this human was teaching them something different from any lesson in the palace. It was not about control, power, or perfection. It was about perception, understanding, and emotion. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Ethan took the daughters to the small balcony of his room, which overlooked the floating gardens of the palace. Lush greenery stretched far into the distance, with streams of light reflecting off crystal formations. "Look at it," Ethan said, gesturing broadly. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Lyra's eyes widened. "Yes, but we see it every day from the palace windows. How is this different?" Ethan smiled. "Because here you are not just seeing it, you are experiencing it. You can choose to notice details, colors, movements. You can feel it without expectation. Humans believe that noticing and appreciating the world is as important as living in it." Nissa knelt and touched a small leaf that extended over the balcony. "It is soft, so simple, and yet peaceful." Kira leaned over the edge, watching the sunlight glint off crystals below. "It feels alive, not like power or energy, but life. You feel it too, don't you?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, that's what I mean. Understanding life, caring for it, and respecting it, that is what makes us strong." For the first time, the daughters began to see human strength not as physical ability, but as emotional resilience. They realized that this human's calm presence, his understanding, and his quiet care were more powerful than any palace command or alien technology. Back inside the room, Ethan prepared a small lesson about problem solving, using simple puzzles and exercises that required teamwork. He wanted the daughters to see that working together, listening to each other, and trusting one another could accomplish far more than acting alone. "This is a puzzle," he said, showing them several pieces of a holographic pattern. "You must fit them together. No one piece can do it alone. Only by working together can you solve it." The daughters immediately began experimenting. Lyra manipulated light to see how pieces reflected. Nissa sensed the emotions of her sisters to guide placement, and Kira used her agility to move pieces quickly. Slowly, they began to fit the puzzle together, learning the importance of cooperation and communication. "See," Ethan said gently, "when you work together you can solve things faster, easier, and better. Humans believe that collaboration is as important as skill." The daughters exchanged looks, impressed. "It works," Lyra said finally, placing the last piece in its spot. "We did it together." "Yes," Ethan said, smiling. "Exactly, that is the strength humans have, not just skill, but understanding, cooperation, and care." The afternoon turned into evening, and the daughters became more relaxed, chatting quietly among themselves. They began to share thoughts about their experiences in the palace, the pressure, the expectations, the loneliness they often felt despite the grandeur surrounding them. Ethan listened patiently, offering advice and support. "You don't have to be perfect all the time," he said. "You are strong because you care, because you try, and because you support each other. That is more important than any power or title." Lyra leaned against a pillow. We have never heard that before. Always it was expectations, orders, lessons, never care." "You care even though you are not required to," Ethan nodded. "Yes, that is what humans do. Caring is a choice, and sometimes it is the strongest choice you can make." Kira tilted her head thoughtfully. "It feels strange but good, like freedom." Nissa smiled softly. "I feel safe, and I feel stronger than before, not because of my abilities, but because of understanding and trust." The daughters were beginning to see a new truth. That true strength was not only in their alien powers, but in emotional intelligence, empathy, and trust. Humans, though physically weaker, possessed a resilience and wisdom that could guide even the most powerful beings. As night approached, the palace grew quieter. The search parties returned to their posts, still unaware that the daughters were safe in Ethan's room. The queen, sensing a subtle change in the daughter's energy, began to question everything she had assumed about strength and protection. Ethan prepared the room for the night, arranging blankets, setting out a small meal, and ensuring that the daughters were comfortable. They curled together once more, talking quietly about their day. For the first time, they felt that safety and comfort were not mutually exclusive with freedom. "You are very different from anyone we have ever known," Lyra said finally, her voice soft. "You do not command, you do not demand, you guide and you protect." "Yes," Ethan said quietly, "that is human strength, not in power, not in skill, but in heart. You are learning it too." Nissa rested her head on Lyra's shoulder. "We feel understood." For the first time, truly understood. Kira's eyes closed slowly. "I think we could learn a lot from humans, perhaps even more than the palace can teach." Ethan smiled, watching the daughters fall asleep. They had begun to trust him, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that trust, fragile but growing, would become the foundation of a bond that could change the way aliens viewed humanity forever. Outside the room, the palace remained in chaos. Guards and drones searched tirelessly, yet they would not find the daughters here. Not because of hiding or cunning, but because the daughters had chosen a place of trust, guided by human care and empathy, a place beyond the reach of technology or authority. Far above, the alien queen sensed the change. Something was different in the energy of her daughters. They were close, yet somehow freer, calmer, and happier. She did not yet understand why, but deep inside, a question formed. Could it be that humans, so small and seemingly simple, held a wisdom the palace had never known? That night the daughters slept, protected and comforted by a human who had shown them the power of trust, empathy, and understanding. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing hour, laying the foundation for a new perspective on strength, power, and what it truly meant to care for others. The palace may have thought it controlled the situation, but the real lesson was happening quietly in a small room, where human heart and alien curiosity met, creating a connection that no authority or technology could ever break. And as the stars of Lithra shimmered in the violet sky, the stage was set for the final chapter. The queen would soon see that humanity's true power was not in weapons, nor in speed or skill, but in understanding, care, and trust, the qualities that could change even the strongest of civilizations. The next morning, the palace of Lithra stirred with activity. Drones hovered over gardens and towers, guards patrolled hallways, and attendants whispered rumors of the continuing disappearance of the alien queen's daughters. Yet in a small room at the edge of the palace, Ethan sat quietly, watching the three young aliens who had chosen to remain under his protection. Lyra, Nissa, and Kira were awake and alert, their eyes reflecting curiosity, trust, and a quiet excitement. They had spent several days with Ethan, learning from him, exploring human ways of thought and understanding, and discovering a new kind of strength that went beyond their alien powers or palace training. Ethan smiled softly at them. "Good morning," he said. "Did you sleep well?" Lyra stretched her arms, her light dimming slightly as she did. "Yes, we feel safe here, more than anywhere else." Nissa nodded. "We feel understood, for the first time not judged or ordered, just seen." Kira tilted her head thoughtfully. "You have shown us something no palace lesson could teach. Strength is not just power or skill. It is care, understanding, and trust." Ethan nodded. "Exactly, that is the human way. Our power comes from the heart, from empathy and cooperation. You are learning it too." The daughters smiled faintly, realizing that their time with him had changed them. They were stronger now, not just because of their abilities, but because they understood the power of trust and compassion. As the day progressed, a soft but insistent sound echoed outside the room. It was the Queen's personal envoy seeking to find her daughters. Ethan stood calmly, signaling the daughters to remain quiet. He had prepared for this moment. The Queen's arrival was inevitable. The door opened slowly, and the alien queen herself entered. She looked around, her sharp eyes taking in the room, the blankets, and finally, the daughters. She paused, sensing something different, not fear, not tension, but calm, trust, and even happiness in her children's energy. "Lyra, Nissa, Kira," the queen said, her voice steady but curious. "Why are you here? Why have you hidden from your own palace?" Lyra stepped forward slightly. "Mother, we are safe here. We are not hiding from you because we fear you. We are hiding because we feel safe with him." She gestured to Ethan. The queen's eyes widened slightly. She had never expected a human, a species she had considered primitive, to provide safety for her daughters. "You trust him?" she asked softly. "Yes," Nissa said quietly. "He does not command, he does not punish. He protects, he listens, he cares. We have learned there is strength in understanding, not just in power." Kira stepped forward, her eyes steady. "We are stronger now because of him, not just physically, but emotionally. We understand more about ourselves and about strength. It is something the palace never taught us." The queen was silent for a moment, her mind racing. She had always believed that authority, command, and control were the highest forms of strength. She had trained her daughters to be powerful, skilled, and cautious. Yet here in a small room with a human, they had learned something different, something profound. Ethan stepped forward gently. "Your Majesty," he said respectfully, "I do not seek to replace your teachings or your guidance. I only offer trust, care, and understanding." These young ones responded because they feel safe and valued. Strength is not only about power or command, It is also about empathy and cooperation. The queen studied him closely, sensing the truth in his words. Humans were different from her people, smaller, weaker in physical power, yet their minds and hearts were extraordinary. They possessed a kind of strength that her palace, with all its technology and authority, could never teach. Lyra spoke again, softly. Mother, we have learned from him. We are stronger because of trust. We are calmer because of care. We are happier because we are understood. The queen's gaze softened. She looked at her daughters, seeing the calm and confidence in their eyes. For the first time, she realized that her power alone could not give them what they now possessed: understanding, empathy, and emotional resilience. She took a slow step closer. I see, she said quietly. I never thought that humans could teach these lessons. I always assumed strength meant control, power, and authority. But all of you have shown me something different. Ethan bowed slightly. Humans learn by experience and trust. We do not rely on power alone. Empathy, care, and understanding are just as important as skill or strength. The daughters moved closer to the queen, their expressions open and sincere. Lyra spoke softly. Mother, we are not hiding from you. We are sharing what we have learned. We want you to see the strength in understanding, in trust, in care. The queen studied them, her eyes misty with realization. For the first time, she understood that her daughter's growth required more than lessons in power and authority. It required guidance, trust, and compassion. Slowly, she knelt before them, her regal presence softened by humility. I understand now, she said. The lessons you have learned are different from what I imagined. They are important, more important than I could have known. The daughters smiled faintly. Yes, mother, and he has shown us that humans can be allies, protectors, and teachers in ways the palace never could. The queen turned her gaze to Ethan, seeing the quiet strength in him, the human who had cared for her daughters without expectation or authority. You have shown us something extraordinary. I misjudged your species. Humans are stronger than I thought, not in power, but in heart and mind. Ethan bowed again respectfully. Thank you, your majesty. Humans have much to learn as well, but we believe in protecting and understanding. That is our strength. The queen rose slowly, her mind filled with new understanding. She looked at her daughters, then at Ethan. From this day forward, the palace will consider not only power and authority, but also empathy, care, and trust. The lessons you have learned here will guide the next generation. The daughters felt a warmth in their hearts. They had not only found safety, but had also become bridges between two species, showing that understanding and trust could unite even the most different beings. Lyra spoke softly. Mother, thank you for trusting us to make this choice. We have grown stronger, and now we can bring that strength back to the palace. Nissa nodded. We can show everyone that there is power in kindness, that understanding can be stronger than fear or control. Kira smiled. And humans can teach us these lessons if we are willing to listen. The queen nodded slowly, her regal composure restored but softened with new wisdom. You are right, strength comes in many forms. Today I have learned from my daughters and from a human. It is a lesson I will never forget. Ethan stepped back, giving the queen space. The daughters moved closer to him, and he smiled gently. They had built trust, shared knowledge, and formed a bond that could withstand fear, authority, and uncertainty. Outside the room, the palace remained busy, unaware that a quiet revolution had taken place within these walls. The daughters had learned about human strength, and the queen had learned that empathy, care, and understanding could be more powerful than any weapon, authority, or command. As the sun set over Lithera, casting soft violet light across the palace, the daughters stood with Ethan and the queen in the balcony room. They looked out over the floating gardens, feeling calm, confident, and connected. The queen spoke softly, her voice carrying the weight of realization. From this day forward, the palace will honor both strength and understanding. Humans may teach us if we are willing to learn. Lyra, Nissa, and Kira smiled, feeling a sense of triumph that went beyond victory or escape. They had found safety, learned new strengths, and built a bond that would endure. Ethan, quietly proud, watched the daughters and the queen. This was the moment humanity's true power had been revealed, not through weapons, not through technology, but through trust, care, and understanding. And in that small room, with the stars of Lithera shimmering above, a new era began. An era where humans and aliens could learn from one another, where empathy was recognized as strength, and where the bond between species was forged through heart and mind, not fear or authority. The alien queen had seen it. Her daughters had experienced it. And humanity, in its quiet but profound way, had shown that the greatest power in the galaxy was the ability to care, understand, and trust. The palace would never be the same. And neither would the hearts of those who had witnessed the quiet miracle of understanding. For the first time, aliens and humans alike could see that strength was not only in the mighty or the powerful, but in the gentle, the compassionate, and the wise. And in that truth, the galaxy would find a new hope, a new perspective, and a future filled with cooperation, trust, and respect. The daughters curled together one last time that night, finally at peace, knowing that they were safe, understood, and stronger than ever before. Ethan sat beside them, quietly vigilant, proud not only of what they had learned, but of the bond they had all created together. The alien queen watched from the doorway, a soft smile on her face. She had learned that true strength could come in unexpected forms, and that humanity, small and seemingly fragile, held a power that even the greatest alien empires could not ignore. The galaxy, vast and endless, now had a new example of what could be achieved when beings chose care over fear, understanding over authority, and trust over suspicion. And all of it had begun in a quiet room with a human who simply chose to protect and understand.